All right. Hey, everyone. It's Simon here from Aquabatics, and I'm just checking in with our weekly live stream discussion here. And I had Nikki and Liam. Liam just disappeared off of our feed here, but he'll be back in a moment. And so we did a topic a couple of weeks ago on outfitting a Dagger kayak, which I had no business being involved in or talking about. This is definitely a topic that I have even less authority to be talking about, but I have two fantastic people on board to help educate me and to chat with all of you about canoeing in Canada. It's going to be a bit of a free form kind of a discussion here, and I'm really excited to welcome Liam and Nikki to the show. It's not really a show. It is what it is. So basically, just a really quick introduction. I'm Simon. I'm from Aquabatics. Been around the paddle sports game for a number of years now. Run a couple of shops here in Alberta. Then we've got Nikki Rekman, one of the best paddle sports reps on the planet. So she's a rep for Eskeef Canoes, Kokatat Drywear, Werner, amongst a litany of other things. And so I've known Nikki for probably 15 years now, and she's been a fantastic support person for the shop. I've learned countless amount of things from her over the years. She also happens to be a very passionate tandem canoeist and digs long multi-day trips and that kind of thing with her partner, Mark. So we're really excited. I'm really excited to learn more about that side of the world of canoeing. And then we've got Liam. So Liam I met through the shop, and he is someone who is capable of kayaking and chooses to canoe.
Yeah.
Something truly unique, I think. And he's a whitewater canoeist who has done some pretty epic adventures over the years. And again, really excited to chat further with Liam about his canoeing adventures and that kind of thing. So what I'm going to do to start is I'll start with you, Liam, if you don't mind. If you could just give us like a little bit of a background and a little bit of insight into, how you got into canoeing, what kind of makes it tick, what makes canoeing tick for you. That'd be a really great way for people to start to get to know who they're chatting with.
For sure. Yeah, so I got into canoeing in the early 2000s, kind of through a friend who started canoeing, as well as I did some in the military when I was in there. And I really found a connection with it and a way to explore further and just get out there with more gear as opposed to hiking and measuring your pack weight and everything like that. I found that you could take more and more gear with you. So with it, I started doing a lot of multi-day trips, and I found I was portaging around all this easy white water. In hindsight now. So, I made it a goal, in the outside of the tripping season, that I would focus really heavily on paddling OC1 or solo canoe to improve those skills. And I do paddle a lot of tandem, but just to help myself, get better, I guess, for tripping down the road, right? So
awesome. Yeah. And so you said you did a bit of canoeing in the military. Like, how did that all play out? Like, what was the context of that as far as your training and such?
Yeah, it was random actually. So we would do little exercises where they would just engage canoes with us, or even rafting kind of. They were more of ducky style.
Okay, yeah.
And we use them for little exercises here and there. If we had to do some bridging exercises, or if we're doing an explosives thing like that, you know what I mean, we'd use them to get closer to an objective.
Okay.
So I totally found this cool connection with there. It's just a lot different there because you learn how to swim with these crazy heavy boots on and cotton clothing, no PFDs and a metal helmet on your head, right? So it's a little bit different now than back then. So
maximum sinkage.
Oh my God, sinkage. Crazy, yeah.
And so we'll come back, Liam. So Nikki, your background with canoeing is probably quite different than Liam's. I'm pretty sure you didn't learn in the military. So give us a little bit of insight to where you're from, how you were first introduced to canoeing, and sort of the process that's gotten to where you are right now.
Sure. So definitely didn't learn in the military like Liam. It was actually about 30 years ago. I've just aged myself in high school. And that was in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. And my high school had a canoe club. And that was my introduction, and I loved it. We did a grade 9 trip, and then I think it was in grade 11 or 12, we did our first, I think it was 7 days. So yeah, high school played a big role in it, and it just kind of lit a passion in me for the outdoors in general. I went away to university in Edmonton, and it kind of continued through my undergraduate, just recreationally with friends. And then I graduated from King's in 1994, and I couldn't get a job in my field at the time as a biologist. And I started working at an outdoor store,
That was
and I started
Totem,
working
right?
in the paddling department. Sorry?
That was at Totem, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
And as they say, the rest is history. And I've been in the paddle sports business now for about 25 years. Yeah, 25 at least.
Yeah.
And have been canoeing all that time. As you mentioned in the intro, mostly tripping with my husband Mark. And yeah, it's definitely the way to go for me in terms of a vessel to paddle. Just for comfort, and Liam alluded to, you can bring lots of crap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a comfortable way to travel.
It's
for sure,
totally.
right?
Yeah.
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 And so for both of you, this is sort of actually, before I go into this next question. So Liam, did you have any exposure to canoeing as a kid? Like in high school or junior high?
No, surprisingly not. No, I didn't do any of it in high school, and I totally wish I did, like an outdoor ed. I joined the military when I was like 17, right?
Okay.
So like technically in high school, right? But not any like outdoor eds, which would have been awesome or something like that. So
Yeah, because it strikes me as a distinctly Canadian thing, right? It's
totally. Yeah.
we're from in Australia. Like I didn't even know it's Canadian canoeing. Like it's like North Americans call koalas koala bears. We call Canadian. It's like Canadian canoeing. Like
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just grew up knowing that's what it was, and so I actually personally my contact points with canoeing have largely were largely in the UK. So I left Australia after a couple of years of post secondary and wound up teaching at a summer camp called PGL in the UK, which is pretty everyone goes to PGL, and there's a lot of like sketchy instructors. It's great. It's a great place to have. It's a total summer camp, awesome place to be. And I went to travel the world and wanted to basically be the gnarliest whitewater kayaker on the planet. I quickly realized that teaching kayaking was largely done on lakes, and in the UK, you got to go into moving water way more quickly teaching canoeing, which I found super counterintuitive. And so I put my hand up. I was like, please pick me to be a canoe instructor. He who had never been in a canoe before, and being a 19 or 20-year-old dude, I just like went to town on it, had nothing better to do, and kind of learned how to tandem canoe and kind of learned how to be a second instructor. And so got to cruise around on Simmons' yacht in the UK and had a fantastic time of it, but then started traveling and really focused on whitewater paddling. So kind of lost the flow. And then before this COVID-19 malarkey kind of came up, it was one of my goals was to learn to solo whitewater canoe this year. Maybe this is a good year to do it because there's not a lot else going on, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully this conversation will inspire you to still do that. But then also we know that you have a family, so.
Yes, yeah, I know, and that's crazy because I'm a raft guide. Like I worked as a raft guide all over the world, and I pride myself on being like a raft guide, right? And so the Kootenay, which is one of the trips that I do with my family every year, it's like a 4 or 5 day raft float trip. Would be really cool in a canoe, and I think Liam's going to talk about that a little bit later on, and a little more adventurous than maybe a raft. However, when you talk about packing for a trip, a raft cannot be beaten. It cannot be beaten.
No, yeah.
At
the
all.
size of coolers and stuff, yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So for me, like one of the interesting things for me is not being a frothing canoeist. And being in a store like Aquabatics started when I started working here. Susan, the previous owner, who also has a store in Smithers still. We had some canoes. We had some Mad River canoes, and we had some Hellman canoes. Bob's a great guy down in Nelson there, and makes some really nice boats. But we never really sunk our teeth into it. Like Undercurrents were down the road, and they had a ski who Nikki is a rep for, and a few other brands like Clipper and such. And so we kind of just did a little bit here and there. So I never really got into it. And from what I could see from the outside looking in was that it seemed that canoeing was kind of waning in popularity, like over the last sort of 5 to 10 years. I thought about it before we had this conversation. I don't know where my frame of reference was for that, because we never sold any canoes. We still weren't selling any canoes, but I thought canoeing was kind of like both being in different. Like, I'd really like you to sort of chat about that. Maybe start with you, Nikki, like what you've seen in your tour of duty in the industry, and what you've seen happen as far as ebbs and flows and popularity.
Yeah, like for sure there's gonna be ebbs and flows. But for instance, when you think about a recession, so our last recession was in 2008. And a lot of people anticipated that we would see a real dip in sales. But in fact, paddle sports in general and canoeing specifically, we fared pretty well back then. And there's a couple reasons for that, I think. I think number one, when people are experiencing a little less disposable income, they're not going to be traveling very far afield. They're going to be vacationing near home. They're going to be looking for, activities for the entire family. And canoeing's really approachable in that way. And although the current climate is different from 2008, I do anticipate much of the same once some of these restrictions that we're under right now, and for good reason, once those are lifted, I think people are really going to be excited about getting outdoors again, but staying a bit closer to home. And I think canoeing will ride this well, like we've done previously.
Yeah. That's awesome. What's your take on it, Liam? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I was going to say, I totally agree with what Nikki was saying. Like people, I feel like with the recession downturns, people aren't traveling as far, and definitely we're in a different situation than, the 2008 recession that we're looking at. And, even like Sarah, my spouse, and I were talking today about, like how stoked we are to get back on the water, and how are we going to organize these trips? Because obviously we have to take a little bit of a different approach. But I see people wanting to travel more locally, and that's where I see this canoeing, hitting the backcountry, hitting the Crown land, because there's a ton of trips out there. Like, we've uploaded some on Paddling Maps that don't even involve going into the national parks.
Yeah.
So even with the national parks being closed, with the provincial parks being closed, there is tons of Crown land out there, and the accessibility is there.
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
But so I was gonna say for the change for myself that I've seen in canoeing, looking back at my very first canoe being like a Mad River Outrage, this like super slicey like sausage down the river, to start, moving towards the ledge, and you're seeing the influx of other boat companies now coming to Canada, the Silver Birches and stuff like that, the Black Flies out of the Southeast US. I think there's a super underground community there when it comes to paddling OC1. It's definitely, and I should say underground in the West, is a huge scene in the East. You go down to Southeast US and Georgia and Tennessee and stuff like that. Massive, massive scenes. But there's definitely a tight community here, which actually it's really enjoyable because it becomes like a family almost. Especially in the Rockies, and you're starting to see in BC now us kind of mingle a bit more with the guys from out here. So
with that, it's one of the things that I've often wondered is, it is really strong. If you go down to Tennessee, or if you go down into those into the eastern states, there's everything. There's squirt boaters and there's OC1 people and there's OC1 people running stuff that people in kayaks have no business running. It's just exciting. It's quite impressive.
Yeah.
What is it that makes that? Like, what do you think, Liam? I don't know how much you've traveled into the US and such, but what makes the scene really blow up and be really popular? Is it a longevity thing? Is it a type of rivers thing? What is it? What do you,
well, and it's funny because I was asked this. I was at the pool the other day. Well, a couple months ago when we were able to go to the pool, and I was working, just working your rolls, right? And they said, "Oh man, that looks so much harder. Why?" And it's a weird, like, without getting in, like, I'm not like some like canoe or like whitewater hipster or something like that, right? But there is this like traditional aspect of it that you don't want to see lost, and we're still trying to hang on to it. And it's a super cool sport. Like, I really enjoy kayaking. When I started getting into whitewater, it was in a kayak with EWP. But there's a different aspect of how we look on the water. Like, not how we look. Obviously, we look super goofy and like super scared all the time, right? But like, no, but like, how we look at the river is a lot different.
Yeah.
And it's really challenging. And I really like that aspect to it because it can take something like the Red Deer River. It takes the Red Deer River, which is, a chill class 3 river, and it turns it into something just like super, super fun and just working certain parts of it. And you find this I find like the connection with the river a lot tighter, actually.
Yeah, you got to think. It was like you were saying I think it was the other day when we were kind of touching base on this. It's you have to read the water really well. Like you can't get away with not reading the water.
Totally. Yeah.
And so
I think
I'll go, Nick. Yeah, go.
I thought something that Liam said is really interesting too, and he talked a little bit about you kind of alluded to history. And I think that's something about the canoeing community too that is really strong. Like, we're all really committed to the history of canoeing, particularly in Canada. Like, I mean, it goes back, hundreds of years, before colonization. And, in more recent times, right, it's a big deal because, various prime ministers are, they show up in canoes and we think that's cool. And so much of our country, our history is rooted so deeply in canoeing. You think of the gold rush or the Klondike up on, a river like the Yukon. And it's so rich in history that I think a lot of people who have attached themselves to canoeing in the way that like Liam and I are talking about, that's a real attractive part of it.
Yeah,
totally. Yeah. And I talked about that the other day about when you start getting on these super northern trips, super remote trips. I've done some trips in northern Manitoba where and people proved it. It actually takes 2 weeks to walk out.
So that's right.
Yeah.
You found that out.
And you look at how remote these trips are, and you get out there, and there's a real connection that I don't find. Like when you're off playboating for the day, you're like, oh, this is really beautiful. I'm in the mountains. I'm wherever. You could be in the east or wherever. But in the North Country, when you're tripping, you have this like serious connection in it, and you pretend in your mind, or you don't pretend. You feel like you're the first person ever seeing that.
Yeah.
And you feel like that kind of explorer, and it's a really cool feeling. And I've tried to explain that to people, and they're like, "Oh yeah, cool, man." But then you get out there, and you're totally self-dependent. You're totally on your own, and it's an amazing experience, right? So
yeah, man.
And even on some of the more popular, if you will, northern, multi-day canoe trips, you can still today go on those trips and not see another group of canoeists for a day or two.
Yeah.
So
totally, yeah.
It's that remote feeling that you're talking about. That still occurs even with the popularity and the access of canoeing on some of these northern routes.
Yeah. Even look at Bull Run. I've paddled the Bull Run trip, in even a little bit of the later season.
Yeah.
And you don't see anybody.
Yeah.
Right. And that's an amazing trip. That's a trip that you're in the mountains the entire time, and it's gorgeous, right? It's a true lake trip, right?
Yeah.
But it's a beautiful, beautiful trip, right? So
yeah. And that one
yeah.
we just put on paddling maps. That should be up in the next day or
It's up
so.
now. It's up now.
It's up now?
Yeah,
Okay.
it got fixed.
Yeah.
We were having some glitching issues there, but it's fixed. Dan, our super programmer, got it fixed just in time. So we'll bring that up in a little bit. So it's interesting. Nikki was really nervous about this, but as soon as she got started talking about canoeing, she's got this big ass grin on her face. It's pretty cool, man. Like, she's into it now. It's great.
Yeah.
So talk to me about the regionality of canoeing in Canada, because Canada is such a massive country, right? So, and kayaking wise, my happy world of like whitewater paddling, it's super regional, right?
Mm-hmm.
You think about paddling out east, and I know we've got a few people from out east here, so they may have some comments on it as well. But the regionality of it, like whitewater paddling, you've got the Ottawa, which is the big river out east. We don't have anything really like that, especially in Alberta. So you have this big water play boating scene out there. People are paddling in t-shirts by the end of June.
Yeah.
But out here, we're like prancing around in our dry suits until July or August, and try not to bash our heads off the rocks.
Yeah.
So obviously there's some history behind it, the way that people have used canoes to travel differently in the north and the east and the west. Can you comment on that, like the regionality of it? Because you sort of alluded to it with the whitewater canoeing in the southeast and that sort of thing. So is it noticeably different across Canada?
Totally, yeah. Like I've had the opportunity to paddle the Ottawa in OC1 and
Awesome.
and OC2. Very different experience. Some phenomenal paddlers out there, and yeah, like just drastically different. Canoe approach to a river there is so different. But and I will give this to the guys in the east. The community out there is amazing.
Yeah.
Because I remember like going and surfing in like McCoy's or something like that, and people are like, "Oh wow, that's super trash. You can't do that in the canoe." They're like chanting for you. People are like holding up babies, right? And you feel like a hero, right? But and then you get like worked a little bit, and you come up and you're holding your shoe somehow, right? So,
but not your canoe, just a shoe.
But not your canoe. You don't know where your canoe is. Yeah, I've never lost a paddle though. Never lost a paddle. Yeah, definitely. The water out there is, for play boating, it's phenomenal. Lot of like good pool and drop. You see this up in northern Saskatchewan too. That pool and drop river, super fun for canoeing. And it, like you said, just not getting raked is one of the best things. Getting river rocked. Versus out here. And for tripping, I haven't had the opportunity to trip in Eastern Canada, up like in the Algonquins and stuff like that. But very cool. Anything in the Canadian Shield, I'm totally on board with. Like I've done the Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and it's just a totally different experience. Totally different river, like warm water. Is growing up in the Rockies. This is like mind blowing. Yeah, it's crazy. And just jumping in after or being on the lake in the middle of the day and you're like, oh, I'm pretty hot. And you just jump into the water and have a quick swim, pretty phenomenal. And you don't see that. When you're doing the Kootenay, there's never been a moment where I'm like, I'd rather be in the water right now.
Right.
Because it's so cold, right? But
even in August, it's freezing.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. And I'm a baby. Like I wear a dry suit year round. Like it's, I think I put my shorty on one day last year. So
you spend more time in the water than out of it, I think, in an OC1. So.
Totally. Yeah. I've mastered swimming for sure.
Yeah.
Boat
assisted swimming, that sport for me anyway. What about you, Nikki? Have you got any sort of thoughts on that as far as like from the tripping side of things, like the regionality of it from, Western Canada because we're united as one, but Eastern Canada and Western Canada, the differences, like, because there's probably cultural differences and stuff around it as well, I would imagine.
I think so. I think in Eastern Canada, there's more history of canoeing.
Right.
Some of our canoeing greats are Mark Scrivers, our Paul Masons, our Becky Masons of the world. They're all from out east, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, not to say that we don't have some awesome explorers like Frank Wolf. He's from Vancouver.
Okay.
We've got some folks, but there is some regionality for sure. As far as tripping goes, I think there's a lot of amazing tripping routes across the country.
Yeah.
From a purely tripping perspective, one aspect that people may not think about, though, is on each side of the country, in our coastal regions.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
I haven't paddled on the east coast of Canada, but I have obviously here on the west coast of Canada, and pretty much we're comfortable taking our canoe on coastal waters. If there's a potential for bigger crossings, obviously we would use a spray deck on our canoe.
Right. Of course. Yeah.
But you can do coastal canoeing. There's no reason with the proper equipment that you couldn't take your canoe to the Broken Group for a week versus your sea kayak. I actually haven't done a multi-day canoe trip out there. I have actually only sea kayaked out there. But the water that I've experienced there, I would have no issue taking a decked tandem canoe. So out here in the West, we definitely have places to canoe on the ocean. Liam mentioned the Barron Lake circuit. And then as you go north, of course, there's lots there too. And we have our own, albeit smaller, whitewater community, OC1 community, even on the island, Vancouver Island. Oh, hey,
We just
Dylan.
Dylan said g'day, and he said that he loves coastal canoeing.
Yeah.
So I like it.
Yeah.
And so, I lost my train of thought. Dylan, you made me lose my train of thought there. Where was I going with that? I totally forget.
We were talking about regionality.
That's right. We were talking. Yeah. So out east, from what I understand, I've only been out east a couple of times to do some teaching on the Ottawa and MKC on the Madawaska and such. But it's lake country, right? Because everyone who comes from out east comes to Alberta and they're like, oh, it's so cute. You've got nice little ponds everywhere.
Yeah.
Right. And so the expanses of water out there seem to be,
it's countless. Yeah.
So
yeah, it's definitely cottage country. And I think kids grow up a lot more canoeing out there than they do here. Like everybody seems to have like the family canoe and the family cottage. I'm not stereotyping Easterners here right now, right? But I definitely see that, and I think maybe that's why we're getting so many phenomenal canoers or canoeists coming out of the East, like you mentioned, the Mark Strivers and the Paul Masons and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And Liam, when you think of some of your canoe trips on the Shield, so that's where my first ones were. I like to think that that's the kind of mecca that we have in northern Saskatchewan, Alberta, and Manitoba. That is the Algonquin Park and Georgian Bay of Ontario, because there's so many lakes that you can access on the Shield.
It's crazy, and I've done trips up on the Churchill. And the cool part of it is, like, when you look at it from Google Maps, you're like, holy man, like you can't even, it's just water, right?
Yeah.
You can't even tell what's land, what's water. And some cool things, I've done, say you're coming, just a trip, just pick a trip, Otter to Stanley, right?
Yep.
And you've got a day or two extra, and you can do a loop. Like you're like, oh, let's go tuck into this bay and go explore, and then, oh, that looks like a portage trail, and you just carry over it, and you're really just exploring for yourself this whole other land that you otherwise wouldn't get to see, really, right? So totally. It's super, super cool.
And so, all right, so on that, so there's all these different ways to canoe. You've got OC1, you've got recreational canoeing as a family, which is like a great way to go hiking without actually hiking, and these big multi-day trips. So here's a quick question for you, and I want you to both answer on the count of. I want you to both answer on the count of three. Okay. I'm not going to tell you the question. I'm going to say 1, 2, 3. And you've got to answer at the same time. Okay. So, how long does a trip have to be to constitute it being canoe tripping? 1, 2, 3, go.
12.
One night. Oh.
I love that. That was outstanding. 12 versus 1.
Yeah.
I like it. I like it. I dig the different opinion. It's awesome. That's the whitewater canoeist versus the purest tripper right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have to
12 is
qualify.
probably too long. Like,
Well, 12 is a super good trip, right? 12
is like my favorite.
yeah,
12 to
because
14.
yeah, after day 4, your muscles are really sore and you've like made that commitment and you stink and you just
Totally.
want to be out there. But like at least day 1, like, it's nice to go do a one day, an overnighter, a quick overnighter or something like that. And
Yeah.
I think because of most of our trips are multi day. It's I strongly believe that packing for a weekend trip and
Yeah.
packing for a 2-week trip, they're pretty much the same. The
yeah,
only
Yeah.
thing that's different is food and water. That's it.
True story. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have you get more bang for your buck on the longer trip. You just have to buy a
Yeah.
little bit of food. I have to qualify. Liam's done like 24 plus day trips in a canoe, so he's no slouch when it comes to tripping.
No.
yeah.
I'll make fun
Yeah, I've definitely slept outside. Yeah.
yeah, once or
Yeah.
twice. So on an efficiency thing, I'm just totally shooting from the hip here. Like there is zero script at this point. So a number of years ago, I did the Yukon 1000 kayak and canoe race from Whitehorse to Alaska, right? So it's 1,000 miles, blah blah blah. I did it with a buddy of mine, Adam, and we did it in a tandem sea kayak. We did it in a Passat G3, so 22.5-foot sea kayak.
Yeah.
So we won. I have to put that out there. That's my little brag. But we were racing against Voyageurs, and there was some tandem canoes as well. Those canoes that they were using were very the Voyager is obviously a different beast, but those canoes that they were using were really quite interesting looking craft to me. They had spray skirts on them, which is something new. I hadn't really seen that before.
Yeah.
But also from a design standpoint, they were different than any canoes I'd ever seen. They had virtually no rocker. The gunnels were like super low, and all the canoeists out there right now are just going like cringing because I know how much you guys all like the specs, and I'm like probably saying everything wrong. But are they specific racing canoes, or are they some kind of river tripping canoe? Like, what's that all about? It was just really different. I imagine they're built to go fast. That seems to be what they're for.
Exactly. So canoes are not all made the same. We all have this image in our head of what a canoe looks like, but they can look very different. Like the ledge that we lost Liam.
He'll come back.
the canoeing that Liam prefers to do in an OC1 versus the canoeing that I like to do in a tripping canoe, our canoes look really different.
Yeah.
The canoeist that's going to race in the Yukon 1000 or the Yukon River Quest, their canoes can look different again because the objective is speed. And so yeah, they don't all look the same.
Yeah.
And those canoes that you would have seen, they were more than likely Kevlar ultralight. They were more than likely no less than 18 feet long.
Yep.
They probably had a very narrow beam, gunnel, a very long water line to help with tracking.
Yeah.
So yeah, very different from the boat that Liam would use if he was going playboating for the weekend, or that I would use, going on a multi-day trip down the Green River in Utah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was remarkable. They were super quick. Like they were super, super fast. It blew me away because I always thought of canoeing as kind of a leisurely way to kind of get around, but they were quick. They were really quick. So that was kind of fun. This segues
That's
really
not where I thought you were going to go.
To where?
Well, I didn't think that's where you were going to go with when you started talking about your Yukon 1000. I thought you were going to ask Liam or I if you should have done that in a sea kayak or a canoe.
Well, I saw you shaking your head. I knew what your answer was. You didn't have to say anything. I don't even know if you were doing it. You knew it, but you were just like you were telling me off without even knowing. It wouldn't have been pretty had I have done it in a canoe. Like I had a little play around with one of the canoes on the day before the race, and I was like, "Whoa, man! I like kayak a lot, and I got pretty damn good balance." But this thing, and the paddle cadence was crazy. It was like, "Whoa!" super fast paddle cadence. It was quite wild. It was good.
Sit and switch.
What's that?
It's called sit and switch. So
Yeah,
you're
that's right.
actually, yeah, you're actually communicating with your paddling partner about when you're taking your paddle out of the water and when you're putting your paddle in.
Okay.
Oh, he's so cute.
Sorry, guys. I had my puppy was crawling on the island, so
Perfect.
he wanted to be introduced. This is Eddie, the new paddling dog. So
he's going to be into it. It'll be great.
Yeah.
You can't take him in a kayak, so I guess that's good. That's good that he's in the right family.
Yeah, he's our new tripping dog. So
I think the conversation about sort of the boat designs on those Yukon craft. Well, actually, if you're a canoeist or a kayaker and you like to go far and suffer a little bit, it's not on this year, unfortunately. This is a bit of a shout out to the Yukon 1000 gang. Such a fantastic event. I haven't done the Yukon River Quest, and I'm sure it's equally rad and super well organized from what I can tell. But what an amazing experience! Like so good, so good.
Mm-hmm.
On a canoeing note, on that race at the end, we were in the last 10 kilometers, and you can see the bridge. It's a long, straight, kilometer wide section of river, and we were cruising along, and we saw a canoe in the distance, and we thought we were in the front, and we saw a canoe in the distance, and we were crushed because we thought someone had passed it. You have no idea, right? And so we start hauling ass, and we catch up to this canoe, and it was a Coleman canoe, which we're going to talk about a little bit. It was this Coleman canoe, and it had two people in it. It had a big lab dog, black lab in it as well. And the middle of the boat was piled up 2 or 3 feet above the gunnels, and they had a big tarp over the top. Nikki, you've paddled on the Yukon, I know, and there's some characters up there, man. There's some characters. And so we pull up and get next to these people. We just say g'day, and it was this German guy. And so they paddled from Whitehorse, and they were paddling to the Bering Sea. And we couldn't help but ask, what are you carrying? Are you carrying a truck or something in there? They had a bread oven. They had a bread oven in there, and all of their stuff for this 3 or 4 month trip. And we've gotten this really funny conversation with them. We're just like, oh yeah, where'd you come from? All the da 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 da. And it turns out he'd showed up in the country. They had to quarantine their dog for a month or 3 weeks or whatever it was. So his wife stayed and waited for the dog. Their only plan was for her to meet him by the river when the dog was ready at Dawson. So he paddled solo from Whitehorse to Dawson, which is 800 Ks. And then she just went down to the river every day and just waited. And then he eventually showed up. They teamed up together, paddled the Yukon Flats, which is really a neat place, really scary in a way, really neat. And they're paddling the Bering Sea together. They'd been on the water for 2.5 months, 2 months or something like that at that point to do the 1,000 kilometers. And we're like, oh, hey guys, how long have you been on the river? And they're like, oh, how long have you guys been on the river? And we're like, when did you put on? We're like, Wednesday. And they're like, what Wednesday? And we're like, last Wednesday, 6 days ago. And they're like, what? You guys need a Mars bar. And handed us a Mars bar and took off. So that was a good kooky canoe.
That's awesome.
That's funny.
But that was a big tangent. I'm sorry. What I was going to say is, we talk about boat design. Let's go into talking about people who are interested in getting into canoeing, right? So people who have not necessarily done any time on the water, Nikki, I might get you to talk about the family element of it, because I think it's a really great way for families to get on the water for a number of reasons. And so do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. I think the two biggest reasons that it can be attractive to families is related around price and related around space. So kayaking is great. There's nothing wrong with kayaking. But for a family, if you've got 2+ kids, you have 3 kids, that's 5 kayaks in your family, or at least 2 tandems and a single. So it's a little bit more approachable cost-wise to introduce a family to a canoe. And just like we were kind of talking earlier, not all canoes are created equal. We have a number of family ambassadors that work with us at Skiff Canoes, and one of our families, their first family canoe, because they had 5 kids, was the Miramichi. And the Miramichi is 20 feet long. So, you need space for that many kids, and and just the cost, just a little bit more approachable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think even with the 3 kid piece, because even if you do have 2 tandem kayaks, then you need one of your kids at least to be capable enough to paddle on their own, or you end up dragging them around all over the place. And friends of ours, Dan, he just commented below. They did a trip up in Wells Grey, I think it was. Dan, I think that was right, Wells Grey, and they're frothing hikers. They're amazing. Like their kids are my kids' age, and their kids hike circles around mine. My kids seem lazy compared to his kids. And they went and did a guided trip, which is, it's funny for people like Dan and myself. You've been out in the outdoors your whole life, and then you have kids, and then you're the guide, or you're the person that's always leading these trips, and all of a sudden you start taking these guided trips, and you never know how it's going to go. And he was just like, it was awesome, like really good food, and the guide was great with the kids, and this and that and the other, and so it was probably kind of a nice switch for the kids, because they're like hiking 20 plus Ks a day and all that sort of thing. To go out in a canoe and cruise around is kind of fun.
Mm-hmm.
So
and canoeing can get you access, right, to other outdoor activities like hiking, like mountain biking, so
Are you saying canoeing's the gateway drug to other sports, or is it? Yeah.
Well, it's pretty comfortable. It's a comfortable way to travel, right? And so
totally, yeah.
And
definitely.
So elaborating on that, you sort of look at it as far. I think some of these things can be a bit intimidating for people who aren't water people to start with. You go to, everyone's seen them. You go to Canadian Tire, and you see all these canoes standing up, and you go like, whoa. And then you might have tried it once as a kid or whatever, but then as an adult, how do you make that step? Like, how do you go, all right, we're going to do this? What would be a logical progression? Let's start with Liam on the whitewater side, and then we'll look at the family side again. So if someone came to you, Liam, and was just like, oh, I'd be super keen to try whitewater canoeing, like what would that progression, like, understanding that for people to just go and drop $2,500 on a whitewater canoe is probably not what they're going to do before they really know they're into it.
Yeah, so because kayaking is so popular, I found a lot of clubs started focusing on kayaking because it's a lot cheaper of a unit to buy. But there's a lot of clubs out there, some really good clubs actually, all across the country that do have an arsenal of whitewater canoes.
Right.
A lot of older canoes, and I'll touch on that in a second. But the cool part is, like, I've taken people out who want to learn how to canoe. We go start on a lake for a day and just get used to it, like work the balance, because canoeing is very, very like core based. Everybody who's ever paddled with me always hears me say this. I'm like, oh, be like Shakira, let your hips do the talking, right? Because it's such a hip orientated sport, because you're sitting so much higher in your boat. So I'll typically take them out for the day on a lake, and even Kiana Canoe Club in Edmonton. They've got a whack of canoes, older ones, and you can take them out in the ponds. I think paddle night in the summer's on Wednesdays. Don't hold me to that.
Okay.
But a lot of us, like OC1 paddlers, will go down. We'll spend the day paddling with people. They can try it in the ponds. Then we go on to the North Saskatchewan, which is pretty chill.
Yeah.
And they kind of, they can do some sightseeing, see the city from maybe ways you've never seen it before. And then we work on little things like turning into some little rock eddies coming out. And then it's just, after that, it's finding the right community. And that's, that was the huge part, even for myself, right? I've got a super tight crew in Calgary. A lot of guys, and my buddy Earl. Yeah,
buddy.
Got off the phone with Earl just a bit ago. So yeah, definitely, finding the right community to help you improve and keep pushing yourself.
Yeah.
And then take a course. I've been to MKC. I've been to MKC 2 times. I've met some amazing paddlers out there. Jimmy McDonald, who is,
Oh,
is
cool.
on your guys' team there, Nikki.
Yeah.
Phenomenal paddler, and they really push you. What people find with the courses, especially in canoe, is you reach this cap all of a sudden, where you're like, okay, I can roll, I can jet ferry, I can surf, I can do this, but then you kind of reach this like weird cap, and you don't know how to like break through it. And just really introducing somebody else like that on a course or even a club just pushes you to the next level. And I'm not talking about like taking you down something crazy gnarly and you're like terrified the whole time, but just really working on that skill base.
Yeah.
And the cool part about the clubs is, and most open boaters, like I mentioned it before, I started in an outrage. I still have my outrage. It's sitting like right out there. People are more than willing to paddle it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We've got like another setup of gear. I'll take anybody out within like, we'll go do something chill like the Pembina or the Bow or something like that.
Yeah.
And then in these clubs, you get to start in those older boats, which are super like, okay, people try those older boats sometimes and they're like, oh man, this is a super tippy sport. And then they get in the newer play boats or the newer tandems and they're like, oh, I have so much control. I'm bomb proof, because boats have changed so much in the last 15 years, 20 years, that you don't have that like terrifying, I'm going to flip over moment. Like I've paddled boats, like older boats, even now as an experienced paddler, and I get in, I'm like, this boat is not made to be on the water. Like it's like, this is something you plant flowers in, right? Like, so no, it's hard to break into that community, but there's a lot of us. Facebook is an awesome way. Guys on the island, Nikki, you mentioned Guys on the Island. There's a huge scene on the island. They're pretty much out on the paddling the couch every weekend. Rick Bryan, and super like big personalities that are trying to build this community. And there's guys in Alberta. The paddling festivals are huge for people that and with COVID, it's gonna be a little bit different this year. But there's still a community out there. Like, guys will still be on the Red Deer. Red Deer is a phenomenal river to learn on the Bow, the Can, stuff like that, right? So it's just trying to find that community online.
And it's I think it's interesting with these. So the small, it's almost like the smaller the sport, the more niche the sport is, the more welcoming the community is in a lot of ways, because it doesn't get fragmented. And you look at more mainstream sports, and there's ski touring is a good example of it. It's really hard to find a crew of people to go out with. There's all these barriers to entry. Whereas I think potentially with canoeing is the people that are into it are super into it. And they're like, what? Someone else wants to hang out with this? This is great. And so, go, Nikki, for sure.
Sorry, Simon. One of the things that we might be able to do to have as a resource for you guys to have at Aquabatics is, I bet you if Liam and I sat down and made a list, I bet you we could name somebody in every major Canadian city who somebody could call about, going open canoeing. I think of the folks at Wilderness Supply in Winnipeg, Garrett Fash. He's one of our ambassadors. This guy is like connected, jonesing, super inclusive. And you find those guys, in every major city in Canada where there's access to water for OC1 paddling.
Okay, totally. Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. That'd be fantastic. If you guys wouldn't mind doing that, we just chuck that up as a blog post and share that with everyone. That'd be great.
Yeah.
And so for the family paddlers, or those like looking at getting into it for the solitude and getting away from it all, Nikki, what's the logical? Is it sort of a similar progression for people to get into? Like, do you start with a canoe?
Yeah,
we always encourage people to do courses. There's obviously clubs and such. Like, I think it's that intimidation factor. So how do you take away that intimidation factor for people so that they find it's really linear and easy to get into, like for families?
I think it's very similar to what Liam outlined for those that want to go after whitewater. And it starts really with making your purchase from a reputable paddle sports shop like what you guys have going on in Calgary, right? You're going into a shop where there's knowledge, there's selection, and often the people at the shops can direct you to the people in the community if they're not doing the instruction themselves. Not every retailer does canoeing instruction, and that's okay. But they'll know who in town does. So, they can connect you to that community. And they'll be knowledgeable enough to listen to what really, I mean, it sounds kind of hokey, but they'll listen to what you've dreamt about for your family for canoeing. Like, why are you getting into canoeing, right?
Yeah.
And they will hear that and go, oh, well, then this is the boat for you, or this is the boat for you, or whatever, right? So it's a very similar progression. You're getting knowledgeable information, you're getting the right equipment, you're getting directed for instruction, and then you're going to meet people who are like, heck yeah, you want to go down the Fraser for 3 days? And everybody has kids except Mark and Nikki? Let's do it. Like, super fun.
Uncle Mark and Auntie Nikki, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I'll give, obviously we have a shop here in Calgary. We have one in Edmonton. What are some other good resources, Nikki, from shops across Western Canada and across Canada that you deal with? You said Wilderness Supply. Obviously, they run a great show. Who else comes to mind as far as places people could reach out to?
That's super generous of you. Ebb Source for Adventure in Saskatoon.
Yeah.
They offer rentals. They've got very experienced and knowledgeable staff. Western Canoeing and Kayaking in Abbotsford.
Solid.
And although they don't do on-site instruction themselves, they have a great relationship with Ridge Wilderness, which is Dave Woldridge. He's well known out here on the West Coast. He does a lot of stuff with even the big canoes, like the Voyager canoes.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah.
So yeah, and obviously there's a ton of folks out in Eastern Canada. We've got Trailhead Paddle Shack in Ottawa, Complete Paddler in Toronto.
Yeah.
We've got a bunch of folks out on the East Coast, Edio Depot, Old Creel Canoe and Kayak in Nova Scotia. Like,
there's a bunch.
It's very hard to not find a reputable paddle sports shop in this country. Like, we've got them everywhere. So
very cool.
Shouldn't be hard to find.
No, there's lots of them.
Yeah.
We discuss it. We're going to go on pretty quick. Like, we're coming up on an hour already. It's amazing how quickly time goes, So very, very quickly, I just want to touch on, for people who are watching this that are, maybe don't have canoes yet. Like, we sort of broke down for the family piece, boats into sort of 3 different categories. Mm-hmm. You have your real entry-level recreational canoes that you can get at Canadian Tire or Costco or whatever. Obviously, they have a place. And then we have sort of that $1,500-ish kind of dollar range. And then you go into sort of the more premium products at the $2,000 to $2,500 kind of range. And then obviously it can go up from there. But so, like, I'll sort of talk about the entry-level ones. So the entry-level ones, like Nikki mentioned earlier, is what you're not getting if you are buying those kind of craft is you're not getting that sort of the backup service with it. You're not going to get a ton of information, and nor should you expect to. If you go into Canadian Tire to buy a boat, that's not their jam. They have boats that you can buy. Those boats are very recreational, as far as, like, if you're going to go out a couple of times a summer for, an hour or whatever for a dawdle around, I think they fill a void. You don't have to break the bank and you can go paddling. And then as you go through the ranks, like into that $1,500 and $2,000 price range, Nikki, do you want to sort of comment on, what you get for that what's the added value in the added expense that comes with those craft?
So sort of in the mid-range, you're going to get something that's probably more performance oriented, probably lighter than what you would get at Canadian Tire. And then as you jump up, you're going to get into some more advanced materials. So you're going to get into things like T-Form X, which is like an ABS plastic sandwich. And the beauty of that material is it's very reliable, it's durable. And if you're going to be doing anything remote, I would say it's your go-to material. That being said, you can get a family canoe that's gonna hang out at the cottage or the cabin for the summer out of the same material, but you have the good durability. Getting into the even higher price bracket, so now we're talking like $2,500 plus, you'd get into some more advanced composites. So something like Kevlar, where the boat is super light, really stiff. And, all of us as we age, dream about owning a Kevlar ultralight canoe, because then we're going to be able to lift it and keep canoeing. So, but probably more for the families, you're looking at the $1,500 to $2,200 range, and the material that they choose is partly going to be based on what do you want to do with that canoe, where do you want to go, and what are things that are important to you in terms of the canoe.
That's super cool. And one of the things that I kind of joke about with people, not joke, is that a canoe is basically going to outlast you. If you buy a good canoe and you look after it, you see, it's one of the things that has amazed me over the years is you see these canoes that literally have got to be older than me. Like I'm 41. I'm pretty sure there's canoes that are still kicking around that are like they're going to outlast me, right? So if you do buy, it's like that whole buy nice, buy twice kind of thing. But I think another thing is it doesn't have to be a super expensive endeavor. You can get into it, and it's a fun and safe way to sort of get outdoors. All right, so you two are obviously both very passionate canoeists, and it's, and I have to put some context to it as well, because Nikki works in the industry. She's a rep and works around paddle shops and paddling. Most people who work in the paddle sports industry pretty much stop paddling after a year of working in the paddle sports industry, because your entire life is around it, and you go to events, you do paddle, but your paddling for yourself really dries up. Like I struggle with that myself. So you're obviously really passionate about it, Nikki, because you've worked in the industry for some time and you still get after it, which is really good. It's like you travel around in your van and you go canoeing, you go kayaking. It's great. So I said top 5. I don't know what we landed on as far as numbers go.
5.
Liam, we're going to go top 5 canoe runs, and just give us a little bit of, a little bit of color to why and where and all that kind of thing. I'm going to bring up the paddling mat stuff as we go.
Totally. So I'm just going to go with, I'm assuming we're doing day runs, or are we talking the multi-day here?
Whichever you want, man. You lead the charge.
Yeah. Okay. So for day runs, and I brought this up over and over again, Red Deer River. People, they give me a little hard time for how much I love paddling the Red Deer, but just the amount of little different runs you can do on it, surfing, playing in it, tons of fun on it. Second for me is definitely the Upper Old Man River. Phenomenal run. I really enjoyed the Highwood. It was actually my first time on it last year. I got on the Highwood. Super fun. Lots of little drops and stuff like that. Really fun playboating. A good surf day, if you want it, the Briarleys for sure is a good one for me. I'll take a little bit of a bigger boat, or if you do like the Hornberg down run, if you got a little bit longer time, definitely take a bigger boat. And of course, everyone in Calgary, the Can's definitely a good run, especially it's had a lot of work done, after the floods and stuff like that. But it's predictable. You can have some fun on it. The race course is super sporty.
Would be in a canoe.
Yeah, it's fun. Like the race course now is fun in a canoe. And surfing on there, in Santa Claus and stuff, it's a good time. Like it's a really good time, and I've definitely had my share of swims on all those rivers. You know what I mean? So
haven't we all?
Yeah.
So they're your top sort of one day kind of runs.
Yeah.
Walk us through your two multi-day runs are quite fantastic. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to bring them up so that people can see the maps. So start. Which one do you want to do first? The haze.
Let's do let's do the haze.
Haze. Okay. So I'm gonna take myself off and Nikki off here for a second, just so that people can get a bit of a look at it.
Yeah. So I'll just give the lead into the Hayes. So the Hayes River is a river that goes from Lake Winnipeg and empties into the Hudson Bay. Um, it's approximately a 24-day trip. The cool part is you get some very cool whitewater sections on it. You get some massive lakes on it. Oxford Lake, Knee Lake comes to mind. These are massive, massive lakes. The cool part about this river, it was the highway of Canada at one time. York Factory is one of the oldest forts on the Hudson Bay, besides the Port-au-Prince. So as you come through, there's tons of artifacts in there, tons of pictographs, which is super cool to see some pictographs. And there's some odd things. Like you get into Knee Lake, there's actually an island there, and I don't know behind it, why it does this. It's a magnetic island. So when you get near to it, you're tripping, you got your compass, and your compass is doing like the Arctic Circle spins. So it's got something serious going on there. It's called Magnetic Island. The white water up there is super friendly. There is a lot of portages, but mainly the portages are just because the consequence on some of those runs could be quite substantial. There's some falls, there's some good drops. Beautiful, beautiful country, I would say. So definitely a top river pick. And yeah, cool part is I still got some of the maps kicking around. I still love looking at the maps, you know what I mean? And I took these and I uploaded them all into paddling maps. So everything's up there.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I'm just adding these to the comment feed at the moment. So just for those of you who are watching, this paddling map site is free to use, place to find locations to paddle all across Canada and the world kind of thing. So Liam kind of went super next level on this. It's all of those little dots are like waypoints, whether they're campsites or portages or rapids or anything like that. So hyper detailed. You can actually download a GPX from it and stick it right to your GPS, and you've got all of that information. It's been we'll say hard earned, probably with a pretty damn big smile on his face.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna take my ugly mug off the screen again. I'm gonna bring the Churchill up, which is another run that I think you wanted to talk about as well. So
Totally.
I'm gonna go
Yep. So the next one, everybody is familiar. Well, not everybody, I guess. The Churchill River. Nikki and I have talked about it lots. It's the gateway to the Shield for the West Country. So a cool part about this trip, and you can see on the map here, to the south of the map there, the Put-in, you actually start on the North Saskatchewan River system in Pelican Narrows, and then you go against the current. You can't feel the current there because it's kind of a backwater. Across a super famous portage called Frog Skin Portage. It's got tons of history around it. Very cool if you research it. And then you actually, after that, drop into the Churchill River system, which is cool because you, in essentially one trip, you paddle on two different river sections. And then from the Churchill, you get a super untouched portion of the Churchill. The eastern leg, the Otter Rapids, Stanley Mission, that's a very paddled area. And this section here, actually, there's a section where the entire Churchill River, which is a massive flow of water, flows through a 20-meter gorge. It is insane. I would love to go playboat it. The only problem is it takes about a week to paddle there. So it'd be a fly-in trip at that point. But I did flag it on there. And then you essentially keep paddling, lots of white water, a few little portages on this one, and you loop back into Sandy Bay, which is very cool because you're actually only 50 kilometers away at that point from your Put-in. There's tons of hunting outfitters up there that will shuttle you. And they'll watch your car for I think I got a shuttle and watched my car for $50 kind of thing, right? So it's super cool because you can almost loop a vehicle or loop a trip, and you're not driving two vehicles up into the North Country and doing this 4-day shuttle back and forth. Very cool trip, very accessible, all Crown land, and I almost guarantee it, you will not run into somebody up there, which is awesome. So.
It seems like a really desirable place to be right now.
Totally. It's maybe in 2 months when it's a bit warmer.
Yeah. Desirable, maybe not in the weather standpoint, but basically desirable in the standpoint of being somewhere away from all of the shenanigans
Totally.
that are going on right now.
The ultimate social isolation.
Yeah, you'd be pretty bloody isolated, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So they're two newly added ones to paddling maps, which is really, really great. Thanks for doing that, Liam. And then, so Nikki, what about you? You've got obviously a slightly different focus, but I saw your eyes light up when he was talking about the Churchill. So obviously that's something that you've either done or would like to do.
Well, no, I have done it. I've done the more populated section that Liam referred to, and that's where I went in high school. And so
cool. Yep.
that area I could go back to again and again. One of my dreams is to bring my husband there, to just because it's spectacular. It's beautiful. Yeah. But I paddle a lot of different places. I guess I'm gonna, just for time, I'm gonna pick two, one in Canada and one not in Canada. So the Yukon, up in the Yukon Territory, that I actually did within the last couple of years. That was a 2-week trip. The history on that section from Whitehorse to Dawson is incredible. I would love to get up there again and keep going. I would like to do the 1000 route, not timed like you did, Simon, a little more leisurely, but the Yukon River is spectacular. You have the history of Lake LaBarge. You can choose not to do the lake crossing if you want, but I would say don't skip it. It can be nasty. The weather can blow up. You can be windbound for a couple of days. You think it never ends because it's like 50 kilometers long, but there's such, again, rich history. Think of the cremation of Sam McGee, the famous Robert Service poem. So yeah, just a rich amount of history, very approachable. There's 2 rapids, technically really only one on the Yukon. That's maybe a class 2 plus, depending on water levels. So very approachable. But take lots of time because there's a ton of historical sites to see. Fort Selkirk is probably one of my favorites because you can get out of the boat and explore these old buildings, and really, really interesting. And then
the camping's amazing on there as well. Like the campsites are phenomenal.
Yeah, the camping's really good. The wildlife is like ridiculously good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that would probably be one of the ones that I'll say as a favorite for Canada. But then the Green River in Utah, I've actually done that trip twice, and I will do it a third time, and I will likely do it a fourth time. You paddle through Canyonlands National Park. So if you are a hiker and a paddler, this is a dream trip because the paddling is great. The hiking is probably even better. It's very approachable. The green, again, depending on water level, would probably be nothing more than a class 2. And the camping, although challenging to access, probably some of the most stunning campsites I've ever experienced from a canoe. And the most unique aspect of this trip is that you take a jet boat as part of your shuttle. So the Green River meets up and flows into the Colorado River. So your Green River trip, whether you started in Green River, Utah, or you started a bit further downstream and just did the Labyrinth and Stillwater Canyons, you always take out just at the confluence of the Green and Colorado or just below. And you have to arrange a jet boat shuttle. And that jet boat takes you all the way back up the Colorado now, back to Moab. So you actually, in one trip, get to experience 2 very significant waterways. You just are accessing them a little bit differently from each other. What else can I say about the green? Because my work has me mostly very, very busy until this year in the spring and summer, I would say most of the trips that we've done have been in the fall. So the nice thing about that is they're very underutilized once the kids go back to school. So September, October are beautiful months to canoe in Canada and the southwestern US. Your nights are a little bit colder, but generally a great time of year to go.
Very cool. Yeah, can extend that canoeing season if you don't have those pesky kids to deal with. It's perfect. Well, we managed to eclipse our hour goal. We're at an hour and 11 minutes and 30 seconds right now. So we might shut it down. Thanks so much, guys. Like, I really appreciate the time, and I feel very inspired to go canoeing now. It's a very strange feeling, I must say. I'm torn. But thanks to everyone for tuning in, and Liam, Nikki, thanks so much for your time. Very much appreciated. It's always nice to chat with people who are super passionate about what they do. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at Aquabatics, and if we don't have the answer, we've got wonderful people like Liam and Nikki that we can get the answers from. So thanks so much for your time, gang, and we will sign off, and we'll be back next Wednesday, and we're going to be chatting with Mike Harvey from Bad Fish Stand-Up Paddleboard. So we're going from one-bladed sport to another one-bladed sport, which I'm equally awful at. So this is great. Just putting myself out of my comfort zone constantly. So thanks again, gang, and we will see you later. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Bye.
Simon. Bye.
Bye.